There are levels to world building. There are fantasy stories that are amazing at exposing us to fresh worlds, that have worlds that truly contribute to the story, that support the themes, worlds that are worthy of wandering in, worlds that inspire us. And then there are worlds that are trash, worlds that make the story worse, worlds that leave us wondering, what was the writer even thinking? Today, I'm going to lay it all on the table. I'm going to give you my 7 levels of world building from the worlds that I've read. No holds barred, what I think is trash and what I think was great, and what I think was absolutely goated. So, join me for the ride. Disagree with me in the comments, and let's talk 7 tiers of world building. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time World Building with your host, Marie Mullaney. A few ground rules before we jump in. Obviously, this is subjective. It is my opinion, okay? Do not take this to be an attack on you or anything about you if you like an author's world that I don't like. Secondly, I'm talking about world building here. Someone can have an amazing plot and still have an average at best world, or they can write great characters and still have an average at best world. And I will call that out as I go through and say, look, the story here was great, but the world was kind of eh. So bear that in mind as well. All the different tiers can be used for different kinds of storytelling, except for the first tier and maybe the second one. Those two are trash, and you shouldn't be using them. Okay, enough caveats. Let's get into it. Tier 1 is trash. This is where the world is chaotic, it doesn't make sense, or it's written as a thin veneer so that the author can make some kind of philosophical or social commentary. It is undisguised in its nature. It literally just exists in order for the author to make a point. There is no internal consistency because everything is focused around the author's ideology. I have 2 examples of this. One is uncontroversial, I think. If you've ever had the displeasure of reading Victoria Foyt's post-apocalyptic novel Save the Pearls, Revealing Eden, you will know what I'm talking about. That book is the most atrocious excuse for reverse racism victimhood that I have ever read in my entire life. The premise is fairly basic. There has been an absolutely devastating environmental event. The earth is scorched. Only people with dark skins can go outside without protection because they don't get cancer. We'll get to that. And as such, black people are now the new nobility of the world, and they are called, I kid you not, colds in the book. White people who can't go outside and are thus a burden on society and so on are called, are you ready for this? White people are called pearls. Yes, my honey. The underclass is called pearls. I cannot. Anyway, disregarding that atrocity, what bothers me more about this is that it makes no sense. Our skin tone is a development of evolution based on reproduction. Getting cancer from the sun actually happens to both white people and black people. And to make it even worse, black people often get diagnosed later because of the lesions from melanoma might not be spotted, resulting in the cancer getting caught later when it's harder to treat. Darker skin reduces but does not eliminate the chances of melanoma and skin cancer. For that, you need skin cream, a substance that apparently the author just forgot about or something. Also, it's not evolutionary significant to get cancer because, and this is important, cancer doesn't stop you breeding except if it's a childhood cancer. If it did, it wouldn't still be a scourge on the human race. What black skin does prevent is too much UV irradiation during pregnancy, which breaks down the folate in the body, and folate deficiency can cause malformed fetuses. That obviously negatively impacts your reproductive capacity. That is why, evolutionarily, natural selection selects for black skin the closer you are to the equator. White skin, on the other hand, one of the reasons why it developed so strongly in Europe is because without enough UV radiation while you are a child, you develop a condition called rickets, which can be deadly and can negatively impact your evolutionary potential due to, an early childhood death. So, in a place where you have both low levels of UV, like Europe, and you have low levels of vitamin in your diet, you evolutionarily naturally select for whiter and whiter skin to block the UV rays less and less. Even if the sun went ballistic, it wouldn't be that white people would get cancer more and that would be the problem. It would be that their children might be malformed if the mother went out into the sun while pregnant. It wouldn't be that black people would get cancer less. It would be that their mothers would be able to go outside more often while pregnant. That's what would reasonably happen. The book's setup makes no sense and exists only because, I don't know. The author says she intended it to highlight the evils of racism. I would say she missed the mark by a mile, maybe by 10 miles. So, that was my first example, and as I say, I think uncontroversial. There are some amazing reviews on Goodreads about these books, and you can check out their glory in ripping apart this piece of trash, and it deserves it. The second example is going to be more controversial because I'm sure I have people in my audience who actually do like this author and this piece of content, and that is Terry Goodkine's The Sword of Truth. The first book wasn't so bad. It was but it was passable world building. The thing is, though, the more the saga went on, the more he just overrode his world building and broke his own canon. And Goodkind was a worshipper at Ayn Rand's objectivism philosophy. And the whole magic system basically just changes its rules whenever Richard Roll needs to prove a philosophical point about individual supremacy. Because that is the whole philosophy of objectivism. The individual is the only thing that matters. And then we reach book 7, Faith of the Fallen. Richard literally defeats an entire collectivist empire, not through military logistics, not through strategic warfare, not by established magical laws, not even through superior philosophical arguments. No. He defeats the empire by carving, I kid you not, by carving a really beautiful statue out of white marble. The statue is so perfectly individualistic that it causes the enemy to socially disintegrate. I swear I'm not kidding. That whole world exists only to prop up objectivism as seen through the eyes of Terry Goodkind. So those are my two examples of utter trash world building, and you can fight me in the comments if you like. Do not implement this kind of world building, I am begging of you. I understand using your world to make an ideological point. Believe me, I do. I read for theme. I write for theme. I like theme. But theme is not supposed to be a mallet smacking the reader in the face. Theme is supposed to be a thought-provoking idea that makes the reader think. All right, let's move on to Tier 2, the Merrily Vapid. I'm sorry to pick on YA and romantasy for this one, but I am going to pick on YA and romantasy. So, Tier 2 is cosmetic or derivative world building. And again, I've got two great examples. The first is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Now, I've got nothing against her writing, and I know she's been very popular and that a lot of people really enjoy the Dragon Riders and everything else, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the world building is not great. So let me explain why. The setup of the story is that you have high potential Dragon Rider candidates who are in this academy where they compete to the extent where they assassinate each other, and they can get executed for minor failures, or if they fail at certain obstacles, they risk death due to the obstacle itself. That's the early tension in the books. But the thing is, the Kingdom of Navarre, where this is set, is locked into an intense generational war against dark magic users known as the Venin. And they have the Navarre that is, have a critical shortage of Dragon Riders. a critical shortage. But they let the kids with the highest potential kill each other during training. Make it make sense. Please, I am begging of you, make it make sense. There's also a whole bunch of biological inconsistencies in the book. The magic of the dragon bond dictates that a rider's death often causes the death of the dragon, and mated dragons share a sympathetic bond where the death of one kills the other. So, there should have been domino effects multiple times during the book, with a whole bunches of dragons dying due to battlefield death of one dragon or one rider. But that sympathetic chain reaction just never happens. It's all set up to happen, but the trigger's never pulled. It's like a Chekhov's dragon just left lying there in a pair-bonded heap of nonsense. And then the dialogue didn't make any sense to me. The whole aesthetic of the world is a medieval military aesthetic, but the characters' dialogue is pretty much modern slang and therapy speak. And that, for me, was very jarring. Anyway, so that's my first example. My second example is an older book, and it's actually an author that I do like. And I don't want to dog too hard on Terry Brooks, but The Sword of Shannara, the early books especially so, are extremely derivative. They are so Lord of the Rings. You could literally just copy and paste the races straight into it, and it's just basically a knockoff of the whole Tolkien environment. So he falls into this tier as well, into this derivative world-building tier. And I will say he's capable of building way better worlds. I really enjoyed Magic Kingdom for Sale Soul. So Sword of Shannara is just, well, it is what it is. It's derivative. And that's enough of the bottom feeders. So next stop, mid-levels. Just before we get there, though, I have some super exciting news. My upcoming fantasy novel, Blood and Bloom in Las Vegas, has been funded on Kickstarter. Blood and Bloom is an urban fantasy mystery written in a gritty noir style, featuring a druid protagonist. It actually won the Flash 500 novel opening competition, and it has all of the deep, intricate world-building elements you'd expect from this channel. And I realize the irony of saying that while I trash other people's world-building. But what can you do? My world-building, which is hopefully not trash, includes a fully realized magical economy, where fairy dust is the base component. No fairy dust, no spells for you. And that means navigating the complex politics of keeping the local Bloomfae happy. The story also has deep mythological roots, stretching all the way back to ancient Babylonian myths, and it actively draws those myths forward into the modern world. If that sounds like your kind of read, follow the link in the description below and back the Kickstarter to get your copy of Blood and Bloom in August. And then you can judge me and plop me into whatever world-building tier you like. Okay, back to the show. Level 3 is standard tropes. I have only one example here, but there are many others. However, the example I always use for this tier is David Eddings and the Belgariad, which I swear was written to be a standard trope. He uses Planet of the Hats. Drasnians are sneak thieves, Rivens are quiet, introverted people, Chereks are warriors, and so on and so forth. The setup of the book is also a trope. The whole quest is to find the magic thingamy, and then Belgarion uses the thingamy to defeat the Dark Lord, he gets the girl, and all is happiness ever after. It is all just a trope, start to end. But there is a place for this kind of world building. I don't like it per se, but what it does is it lowers the barrier to entry. It's for people who aren't deep fantasy fans, for people who don't enjoy exploring a world and all of its cultural depth and nuance. Yet. People who haven't read Malazan Book of the Fallen and can't get there without a stepping stone. They would enjoy the Belgariad because it is accessible. And there's nothing wrong with writing accessible books or accessible fantasy. They were my entry into the world of fantasy as well a long time ago. So even though I'm rating it as mid, it is its world building that is mid. This kind of world building can definitely support a rich, well-rounded story, It can provide the author with a strong basic framework on which they can hang their story, and if they do their characters well and use their tropes well, they will write a great story that will resonate with a wide audience. That is good for the genre of fantasy because it brings in new readers who might eventually graduate to Malazan Book of the Fallen. So, I don't look down on this kind of world building. It's not a world that I would ever build. The standard tropes. Okay. A step up from this is tier 4, a world that has scaling issues. I have 2 examples of worlds with scaling issues. I don't know how controversial they're going to be, but I'm going to hit them both. I'm going to start with Harry Potter. Now, you can nitpick a lot of world building issues with Harry Potter. There are some things where the world building door is big enough to drive a barn through. Do not get me started on time turners. But the scaling issue is particularly severe because of the population. Hogwarts is a school in England that teaches magic kids. And it's big enough that all the magic kids in England can study at Hogwarts. Well, in Great Britain, really. Europe has 3 other schools, presumably for the magical kids in Europe. Okay, cool. All good so far. Now, here's the thing. According to canon lore, there's 1 school in Asia. Count it, 1. There's 400 million people living in Europe and 1 billion people in China alone. Their magical population would have to be larger than Europe. How do they only have 1 school? Make it make sense. Then, Hogwarts teaches only magic, history of magic, magical skills, and all that kind of thing. And that's great. I appreciate that these kids need to learn magic. But normal high school was quite important in a lot of ways. You learn a fair amount of math in high school, and that's kind of useful. You also learn a fair amount of science and geography and stuff that will help you cope with the real world, which these people still have to interact with. Magical studies notwithstanding, why do they teach nothing of the normal world, the normal sciences at all? It makes no sense. If you scale the world up and you think about all of these people not knowing how gravity works, never seeing phosphate explode, having no idea how an atom gets split and creates a nuclear explosion. Can they even contain a nuclear explosion? If we nuke Diagon Alley, would they be able to prevent it? Would they be able to hold that kind of destructive power? And if they could, did the nuclear bombs drop in 1945 and why? So, scaling problems. The other example that has massive scaling problems is Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Now, I love the Hunger Games. The themes of media exploitation, class warfare, and PTSD are absolutely top tier. But structurally, the math of Panama makes no sense. First, let's talk about the energy math. We're told that District 12 is the sole provider of coal for the entire nation of Panama, including the glittering, high-tech, energy-hungry metropolis of the capital. But Katniss explicitly tells us that District 12 has a population of only 8,000 people, and they're mining coal using the 1930s-style manual pickaxes and coal carts. How? How on earth is a single impoverished Appalachian village of 8,000 people extracting enough coal to power a sci-fi super city and a continental high-speed maglev train network? The math is off by several orders of magnitude. Second, there is the fragile monopoly problem. Panem is structured around hyper-specialized districts. District 4 does fish, District 11 agriculture, 12 coal. From an authoritarian control perspective, it's a great metaphor. But in economic terms, it's a logistical nightmare. If a single district experiences a crop blight, a mining strike, or a massive storm, the entire continental supply chain collapses. Finally, you have the empty continent problem. Panem is supposed to span the entire continent of North America, yet the total population of all 12 districts combined is estimated to be only a few 100,000 people. How is a tiny space population maintaining infrastructure, high-tech border force, and a massive military presence required to keep a vast, wild continent locked down. It's a beautifully polished diorama built to serve Katniss's immediate narrative arc and highlight the themes of the vision. But if you step back and try to run the country's budget and logistics, Panem falls apart in like 5 minutes. Anyway, so that's the scaling problems. And again, you can write great stories here, but be aware that people who look skew at your world can rip it apart. Now, let's move on to the higher tiers and talk about grounded realism. Tier 5 has 2 wonderful examples. The first is Joe Abercrombie's First Law. He adopts a minimalist approach to geography and law, famously refusing to include maps in the early volumes of his books. Many of the foreign lands are simple, recognizable historical analogues of Europe. My cats get very excited sometimes. And they were about to get into a fight there. So I had to go rescue her. Many of the foreign lands are simple, recognizable historical analogues. However, the world achieves a deep sense of reality through its grounded social and political systems. Wars are fought not over abstract concepts of good and evil, but are driven by outstanding debts, interest rates, and calculations of powerful banking institutions. Magic is presented as a fading, radioactive-like force that leaks out of the world, leaving behind physical and psychological consequences. The political cynicism really grounds the world. Political institutions are driven by realistic class exploitations, industrial decay, and bureaucratic self-preservation, stripping fantasy of its romanticized monarchical tropes. So, that is one fantastic example that takes a minimalist approach to world building, but grounds it well in strong social and political setup. My next writer in this category is Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn. Okay, now note what I said there, Mistborn. The magic system in Mistborn is fantastic. You take a metal, you burn it, and it gives you certain abilities. It works great, it's well integrated into the world and the politics. The whole setup is very cool. But the reason why, for me, this is Tier 5, grounded realism, and not Tier 6, the intricate weave, is because Mistborn is very contained. You have the Scar, the nobles, the Lord Ruler, and a little smattering of the middle class in between. It's a very minimalist approach to world building. Now, that changes in the later series as it gets woven into the Cosmere and Era 2 and so on. But Mistborn itself, the first 3 books, this setting is tiny. I never got a sense of a vast world all around us. It's a small world, and to me, that makes it a grounded realism world rather than a worldwide tapestry. And speaking of worldwide tapestries, let's move on to Tier 6, the intricate worldwide tapestry. Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight archive falls here for me in Tier 6. This is a world that is fully integrated and it feels vast. There are storms that travel around the world providing stormlight, which is used in the magic system. There's a whole process of capturing the stormlight and of storing it, and it is embedded in the world and the politics of the world. That's a really great setup for the politics of light eye versus dark eyes, what that used to mean, what it means now, and how that class system changes. The Bridge Crew 4 was set up so well in Book 1. It's this group of soldiers that are battling for their lives in an unending war, these common-born soldiers, and it was really, really nicely done. So absolutely, Stormlight Archive fits here for me. The other one that fits here for me is Catherine Kerr's Devery series, which is a big world with Devery itself, the Bardican worlds, the elven areas, the dwarves, the Horskin, and so on. It also has a magic world where time flows differently and a fully integrated reincarnation cycle. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's also some portal magic going on here, which makes it really interesting. It's layers on top of layers, and you explore so much of this world and so much of its depth and cultural nuance. And a third example seems appropriate here, and that is Brian McClellan's Powder Mage trilogy. This is a world built to match a kind of Renaissance levels of technology, and the story opens with a conclusion of a successful revolution. If you know me, you know I'm a sucker for political stories, and this one was really interesting. Rather than telling us the story of building up to the revolution, we get to see what so few authors write about, the aftermath and complications, and how you keep a revolutionary coalition together. There are two magic systems that are excellently built and well woven into the plot and the religion. Oh my goodness, the religion. Go read Powder Mage, you won't be disappointed. Okay, so those would be my examples of great world building, but not yet GOAT. So let's move on to Tier 7.
It occurred to me while editing that there are a whole bunch of names I didn't mention, and that I really should, say something about them. So the one is John Gwain, who built an amazing post-apocalyptic world for Bloodsworn, which I'm really enjoying. I'm enjoying the books, and I'm on the third book now. They're great, check them out. I would put him in tier 5, because it does feel like a fairly small world. And then there's Robin Hobb, who wrote the Live Ship Traders and the Fitz, the Assassin books, and Rain Wilds, which wasn't that great. But great books. And Robin Hobb, I would put into tier 6. And then we're going into tier 7, or this clip is going to come in just before tier 7. And you're not going to see Robert Jordan in tier 7. You're not going to see him anywhere in the video. And that's really why I'm making this editor's note. I never got into the Wheel of Time. I tried. And every time I get stuck on that Two Rivers village and on Matt, I just cannot get past that kid. I cannot get past how childish he seems in that introduction. And so I just never got into Wheel of Time. But I've read enough about the world to know that it's a spectacular world, one I would probably really enjoy if I could get into the story. Is what it is. So that is why you won't see Wheel of Time here, even though I do think that Robert Jordan would deserve a space in tier 7 of a world building video. Okay. Back to the ones I did choose to be the GOAT.
These are people who started with the roots of their world, the anthropology of their world, and built their way up to the top. I count J.R.R. Tolkien with the Silmarillion, of course, and his world creation story, the development of his world and his races and his languages in this tier, naturally. Another example of this, Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is amazing. It is such a huge world. The magic system is fantastic, and the setup of the story is just amazing. The thing about Malazan that I really love is that it doesn't baby you. It doesn't hold your hand and pretend you're an idiot who needs the world building explained to you. Malazan says, here, sink or swim, honey, this is the world. It's all world building all the way down, and all of it is great. I love Malazan's world building. I rarely mention it because it's so complicated that breaking out individual sections is hard, but it is great. George R.R. Martin falls here for me as well, and your mileage may vary. Fight me in the comments. I know I sometimes poke George a little bit for being very derivative in terms of history, but he did put a lot of effort into integrating his magic systems, his fantasy creatures, and so on, into the derivative history that he took out of our world. So I think he deservedly gets a place here. There's one other lesser-known example that I would put here, and that is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Apt series, which is just such a vast world. It is so well thought out, and the history goes back to when these people learned magic from the giant insects that are kind of a conceptual totem of their various races. It is so good. It's basically insect-type people that have all kinds of different magical skills. And what I really appreciate is that technology in this world changes over the course of the story, and it has an impact on the world as well. It's not a static medieval world. On top of that, it's layered, and there are grounded politics with an empire looking to conquer and people resisting them, trying to knit together an alliance of city-states. But not everybody wants to be allied, and some people think they'll be able to turn aside the empire themselves, and there's all kinds of complexities like that. So I think Adrian Tchaikovsky can deservedly take a position here, along with Tolkien, Erikson, and Martin. And those are my goats, except for two more, which I'll tell you about in the member scroll. And now, while the epic members of the channel scroll past, the incredible humans who changed my world by making these videos possible, let me talk about two people that I could not rank. So here's the thing. One of these people is my absolute favorite, and the other is either in my top 10 or close to my top 10 in authors. And those two are Jacqueline Carey and Ursula K. Le Guin. The reason I haven't mentioned them is because it's hard for me to rank their world building separate from how much I love their stories, their themes, and everything about them. In Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series, the world building is slight. It is minimalist in extreme. She was, in fact, a minimalist writer, so she did not believe in spending a lot of words to tell a story, which is why her stories are pretty short. You glide over the world. You touch loosely on it. But for all that, it is so beautifully put together. There's such deep thought put into how these interactions would work. It's the same with The Left Hand of Darkness or The Dispossessed. The world building seems deceptively light, but she puts so much thought into the cultural impact of the fantastical changes that she makes, that the fact that the world building is minimalist, that the world is small, doesn't matter, because the story is conceptually so big. It felt as though I was just flying over this immense world of possibility, of weird new thoughts. So, I can't rank her. Technically, it's small world building. In reality, it's magnificent, and I love it. And then there's Jacqueline Carey, who writes historical fantasy. I've spoken of her before. She is my favorite author. She will probably be my favorite author until the day I die. I read Cashil's Dart at a very vulnerable and awkward period in my life, and it was the first time that I saw a female bisexual character depicted as the hero in fantasy. At that time in my life, it was very validating that there was an author who was willing to put somebody like me as a hero in a fantasy story. The world of Terre d'Ange will always be attractive to me for that reason. And it's very hard for me to separate my love for the books and what they mean to me personally, and to give any kind of unbiased opinion on them. That is why when I do these ranking videos, I very rarely talk about Terre d'Ange or Cashil's Dart, because I cannot give an unbiased opinion on these books. It's never going to happen. I deeply love Terre d'Ange. I deeply love the Cashil books, all of them. The world building is really good. It does well integrated, culturally nuanced world building with good historical research and all of those things required of the genre. But don't ask me to give an actual unbiased opinion on the technical writing of it. I'm just going to say it's fantastic, and if you say it's not, you're wrong. You're never going to shift me off that opinion. So there you go. There are my two absolute goats. The one I couldn't exactly judge because her themes are so wide, and the one I don't trust myself to judge because I know my bias. And on that note, if you made it this far into the video, leave me your goat in the comments. And while you're there, hit all the good buttons, the thumbs up, the hype, and so on. If you want to see more from me on general world building stuff, check out my video on the cultural mistakes people make in world building, and I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time World Building.